Hello all. This is in continuation with the previous lectures given on access specifiers in C++. We saw in that lecture mainly saw two types of access specifiers. One is private and other is public. We also discussed what we mean by the private access specifier. We can make our data members and member functions as private. We can make our data members and member functions as public in the class. The choice is ours. The private members are not accessible outside the class with the object name and dot operator, but public members we can access outside the class with the object name and a dot operator. Now, we will elaborate this concept with another program which is having member functions as well as data members both. In this example, we are again taking the same class rectangle. Now we are putting a keyword private and both the data members overwritten here. Now the private keyword after the colon is the C++ syntax to make a section private. Now length and breadth are private members of the class. Now we see the public keyword here. Inside the public section, we are creating two member functions. One is set values and other is area. So as a usual practice, as we discussed in the previous lecture, that we will put our data members in the private section and we put our member functions in the public section. In this example, we cannot use length and breadth data members outside the class with object name and dot because we have made them as private, but they are accessible inside the member functions of the class. Private members are directly accessible in the public section of the class. So you can see the function set values is using len and bre. They are accessible inside the function directly because they are the same class. The member function is in the same class as the data members in rectangle. And another function area is also using length and breadth. They are directly accessible inside the class, but they are not accessible outside the class. This is the concept we discussed. We will elaborate more on this idea with the example of this program. We are making a class rectangle. We have put two data members in the private section. We have to put two member functions in the public section. We also discussed in one class about the type of functions we can make. Function can return a value, function cannot return a value, function can accept parameters, functions cannot accept parameters. Here we are using two types of functions. This particular function will not return anything but will accept two integers, and this particular function is will return something of integer type but will not accept any parameters, right? So we are using two types of functions here. Both are inside the class rectangle. Here ends our definition of the class rectangle. We know we have to make class objects first to start with class. In the main, what we are doing is we are doing rectangle r1 comma r2. Here we are creating two objects of the class rectangle. R1 is the first object and R2 is the second object. When R1 and R2 both are the objects of class rectangle, they both will have similar structure as of that class rectangle. That means R1 will have one copy of length and breadth and member functions, and R2 will have its own copy of length and breadth but same member functions. Now we know that the set values function is in the public section of the class, so it must be directly accessible in the main with an object and the dot operator. So r1 dot set values is accessible with two passing two parameters as it is accepting two integers. Each and every line of the program is fully commented so that you can read out the purpose of the line. Here it is a public member of class, so can be used with the object name and dot operator, and it is outside the class. Similarly, with the second object of the class rectangle, we can use this function. We can call this member function passing two integers and the values will be set. R1 dot set values 12 comma 22. What it is going to do, it is calling the function, it is calling this very function of the class r1 for r1 object, and it will set the value it will set the values of length and breadth belonging to r1 to the past values. That means r1 dot len will become 12 and r1 dot bre will become 22. On the similar basis, R2 dot set value, what it is going to do, it is again going to call the same function because both of them belong to the same class. Both of them are of the same class objects. So R2 dot set value is going to call this very function passing 17 and 32 as parameters. And what it will do, R2 dot length will be set to 17 and R2 dot BRE will be set to 32. These member functions are doing the work of putting the values in data members. Why we are putting the values through these functions? Because this time the members are not accessible in the main, they are private, but they can be set by the use of public member function, which we are doing with the help of set values. So coming to the next statement, area answer is equals to r1 dot area. Area answer is an integer type variable declared inside the main. It is equal to r1 dot area. As discussed in previous classes, the function which returns something must be called with an assignment operator. Here I am calling it with an assignment operator because it is going to return an integer value and area answer is taken as int value. So area answer is equals to r1 dot area. This very step is going to call area function of the rectangle class and what it is doing, r1 dot len into r1 dot bre, the object who is calling the member function. The data members of the object are directly accessible here. That means which length and breadth we are talking here, the object which is calling this function. In this case, R1 is calling this function, so this length and breadth will belong to R1. That means we are calculating the area of R1 rectangle and we know the values of R1 is 12 and 22. So this time answer should computed as 12 into 22 will be returned into area answer. I come to this point again. Area answer is equals to r1 dot area is equals to r1 dot area. What it is happening here, area is a public member of the class, public member function of the class. So we can use it with the object name and dot operator outside the class. That's why I'm writing here r1 dot area. Why it is written on the assignment operator right hand side of the assignment operator? Because this is going to return an integer value and we will hold the answer in some integer variable. That's why the syntax is written like that. Now r1 dot area is called, that means for r1 this function will be called, and this length and breadth, here we are not using any object name, then which length and breadth will be calculated? The object which is calling this function, those length and breadth will be computed here. That means r1 is calling this function, this time r1's length and breadth will be calculating here. That means we are calculating 12 into 22. 12 into 22 will be returned by this function and will be received in this variable, and is this a variable we will print with the cout statement. So what we'll get as an output is area of first rectangle is as it is, and area answer will be the answer of this part. Second, with as done in this step, we will do again the similar step r2 dot area. We can again do the same thing because r2 is another object of the class rectangle and r1 area is the public member function of the class. So we can again use it with object name and dot outside the class. What will happen here is area function is again called, length and breadth, whose length and breadth are going to be used, r2's length and breadth are going to be used because r2 is invoking this function. In this case 17 and 32 will be multiplied here because r2 is calling this function. The object who calls the member function, the object who calls the member function, the data members belong to that object. That means here length and breadth will belong to r2 because r2 is calling this function. Similarly 17 into 32 will be returned by this function and will be received here as an answer. This variable was having some value. Now this value will be overwritten, a new value will be given over here and new value can be printed like previous value. This time we are going to print the area of second rectangle. So we compile and run it. I think you can see the output. The area of first rectangle is 264, area of second rectangle is 544. That is multiplication of 12 and 22 and 17 and 32. I think that is clear. Otherwise, we can meet in our doubt class again.